Man, black film insertion is hot right now. So it is great that Linus is talking about this brand new laptop with a 240 hertz black film insertion. HD TV test also is hyping that up. That is great news because that's what we need. We need the big dogs hyping up black film insertion because I think it is a different TV. This LG TV with black film insertion is a different TV. It's two in one. Two in one. It's a completely different experience. So on this video, I'm going to share with you my experience with Motion Pro and what are the differences between low, medium, high, and auto. That magic auto. So, and I'm gonna talk about how relevant is 240 hertz black film insertion. So let's start with the differences. So I have here Spider-Man, and this game is awesome because it allows me to lock the frame rate using dynamic resolution scaling and DLSS and try black film insertion at 120, 100 frames, and 60. So Motion Pro on this LG C1 works at 60, 100, and 120. Why that 100? I don't know, but it's awesome. And I wish I have the option to create a custom resolution and make it work. But it doesn't work. You create a custom resolution at 90 hertz and it doesn't work. I mean, you can see the screen, but you get judder. It doesn't, the impulse wave doesn't work. So basically what it does is something complicated. It's not just putting a black frame in between, but basically at 120 frames, this is doing like 240, and it's strobing a black frame top to bottom. And what that does is it clears the retina. It's called persistent blur, okay? So by clearing that retina, the image that is recorded on the retina, it allows you to see that motion resolution. So basically when you look at the sun, it's so bright that even if you close your eyes, you still see the light on your eyes. So that's the same that happened with sample and hold displays. Our retina still has the previous frame. So when the new one comes, it looks kind of blurry. So that's why we cannot appreciate the resolution in movement. So this is 4K, okay? So, but when you move the camera, it's like 300p. Super low resolution, it looks blurry. But with black film insertion, that improves so much. So let me talk about the differences between low, auto, medium, and high, and what should you use based on the frame rate that you have. So let me start by saying that at 30 frames, if you have a gaming console, at 30 frames, I would not recommend you to use any of these options. I would rather recommend you to use motion interpolation, and I'm gonna do a separate video about that. Basically, motion interpolation is amazing. It's great, and I think that's the future. That's the future. You get a gaming console at 30 frames, is giving you amazing graphics, and then the TV is doing magic with motion interpolation and giving you an 120 frames experience. So, but I'm gonna talk about that on a different video. On this one, let me just say that at 30 hertz, at 30 frames, it doesn't work because the TV is still at 60 hertz. So at 30 frames, you get double image. So because the response time of the OLED is so fast, you are going to see double image. It's going to look like double. So it's going to look clear, but like this. You know, it's not gonna work very well. And yeah, it's not gonna work very well. So let's start with 60 frames, okay? At 60 frames, the auto setting is the worst. This Motion Pro on auto is on this LG C1 is the worst at 60 frames. So of course we're going from worst to better, auto, low, medium, and high. So is auto better than the sample and hold baseline at 60? Yes, it is. And the best thing about auto is that the brightness, it barely changes. So we're changing here from off to auto, and you can barely tell the difference. in brightness, and that is awesome. So if you don't want to use the HLG trick because the colors are not perfectly accurate and you want to play on SDR, or maybe you have your TV calibrated on SDR, this Motion Pro on auto makes a lot of sense. A lot of sense, because it does look better in movement, that sample and hold baseline, and it doesn't affect the brightness as much. It almost doesn't affect the brightness at all. At least on this game. I have to see other games and other examples, but I was just looking at this one. I usually don't use auto. So the difference between not using any black frame insertion and using the high option here at 60 frames is gigantic. So let me explain you how big is the difference. At 60 frames, black frame insertion looks better than 120 frames no black frame insertion, and that is insane. So it is not a lot better, but it is a little bit better. But let's say that is the same. Okay, let's say that 120 frames is the same. So sample and hold 120 frames. Let's say that it is the same motion clarity as 60 black frame insertion. Why would you use 60? Well, because if you lock the game on 60, you can get a higher resolution, and you can actually use if you have a high-end gaming PC, of course, you can actually use ray tracing. Or even if you don't have a very high-end gaming PC, or you have a mid-range, you can get a higher resolution, because when you're using dynamic resolution scaling at 60, you are going to get more pixels on the screen. So if you compare 60 frames with a higher resolution versus 120 frames with a lower fidelity, if they look about the same in movement, which one is better? 60 Motion Pro is better. Clearly better. It's like 120 frames sample and hold. In my opinion, it's a waste of computing power, unless all you care is about input lag, and the input lag is gonna be better with the sample and hold, but it's not better enough to justify the motion clarity loss unless everything you do is competitive. That's all you care about. So let's just start by saying that this is how good this is. This is why it's such a big deal, and I wish all these TV manufacturers, they focus on that, so they can give us, variable refresh rate with Motion Pro. That's what we need. We need G-Sync with Motion Pro. If they give us that, that would be insane. And of course, give us that option with the proper brightness necessary to use the option. Because, on these OLED TVs, they might be worried about burning, okay? And that's why they don't want to give you an option that you can crank the brightness and get, 400 nits full screen, okay? That is a setting hidden on the service menu. They don't want to give you that. But when you are using black frame insertion, the burning risk is less, okay? That's another advantage. So I'm not concerned about burning. So I'm not using it because it's going to prevent burning. But given the same brightness level, let's say we go here on the brightness on the TV, OLED pixel brightness, and we increase that to 100%, okay? So given the same brightness level, comparing black frame insertions of Motion Pro, comparing that to no Motion Pro, Motion Pro is going to prevent burning, okay? It's going to make the TV less likely to have burning issues, okay? Of course, better than that is don't use black frame insertion and don't crank up the brightness to the maximum. But in my opinion, if you spend so much money, you want to get the best picture. So I would not be like, okay, well, let me lower this to 33 so I don't get burned. Don't do that. You're doing a disservice to yourself. So burning is a non-issue, in my opinion, on this TV based on everything that I've researched. So we already established Motion Pro is amazing at 60. it gives you about the same motion clarity as 120 frames, G-Sync or VRR or without Motion Pro. So now, what are the differences between auto, low, medium, and high? So at 60 frame, it's in that order: auto, low, medium, and high. So the only reason why I would use auto at 60 frames is to play the game on SDR, because you don't get that brightness loss, such a big brightness loss. But high is a lot better than auto or medium or low or medium, a lot better. So that would be my recommendation. Use the HLG trick. So basically, I've shown this many times, but if this is the first video you see, we just go to the settings, you highlight select mode, and you click 111311. You come to this secret menu, you change that EOTF from auto to HLG, and you're gonna use dynamic tone mapping here to get the brightness necessary. You go to brightness, use dynamic tone mapping on, boom, it's a punch in the face, a lot of brightness. So that would be my recommendation for 60. So now at 100 hertz and 120, the story changes completely. And actually, the auto option is very relevant. Why? On my experience and on my testing, I've been testing this for a good time now. At 100 hertz and 120 frames, the auto setting looks a lot better than sample and hold. So no Motion Pro. It looks clearly superior. Like, the motion clarity is so much better, and you don't get that brightness loss. That is huge. That is very usable. So now, is high better? Yes, it is clearly better. Okay, but at 100 and 120 frames, the frame rate is so high that maybe most people are not going to see that difference being so big, and it is definitely worth the trade-off. So you're getting less motion clarity, but the brightness is higher, so you can play on SDR with your accurate colors, or you can use HLG, so that same trick that I was using, but instead of dynamic tone mapping on, you can use HGIG, and that looks fantastic. So HGIG gives you a higher overall brightness than tone mapping off with the HLG trick. Okay, so it makes a lot of sense. Motion Pro on auto and HLG HDR on HGIG, and the color settings that I recommend when you use that trick are color gamut on native, saturation 50, warm 50. So again, 100 hertz and 120 hertz, Motion Pro auto detect, it makes the image a lot clearer in movement, and you don't lose that brightness. So that is awesome. So now, I would not recommend low at all, because low actually looks worse than auto. In my eyes, when I tried auto and I tried low, low looks worse. It looks worse, and actually I see the image is a little bit dimmer. It's about the same as auto, but I think it's a little bit dimmer. So I would not recommend low at all. Okay, I would only, I would not recommend low at all. So basically, then medium is a little bit better, considerably better than low, but I would go high. I would go high if you want the absolute best motion clarity. 100 or 120 is absolutely amazing. It's the reason why I got this TV. Okay, that was my dream. I was only imagining how good is that gonna look. Is that gonna look like my CRT? Yes, almost. Almost. The CRT is still better. At 100 hertz, the CRT looks better than Motion Pro at 120. But because I'm talking better in retaining the motion resolution, but because you can get 4K and a higher fidelity, of course, this LG OLED is going to look better than the CRT, of course. So let me talk about that 240 hertz, perfection with this OLED Motion Pro. It is ideal, okay? It is incredible. I can only imagine how good that looks in movement. But, and I'm still glad that Linus, HDTV Test, that everyone is going to hype up this new laptop that's 240 hertz, because that's what we need. But it is completely irrelevant. Why? There's no way in this world that you will ever, not now, I'm not talking about now that we have a 3080, the new GPUs are coming. There is absolutely no way that you will ever play a recent game, so a game that just comes out. You're gonna be able to play that with the current hardware at 240 hertz locked. Impossible, okay? Just not gonna happen. It's just a CPU issue, okay? This game, Spider-Man, for example, I can play this game at 100 frames locked without drops. But at 120, it drops. And I have a 5800X3D CPU, one of the best CPUs for gaming right now. So, yes, the CPUs are going to get more powerful and the GPUs are going to get more powerful, but the games are going to use that power to give you a higher fidelity, because all the game developers are always going to target those gaming consoles. And the new gaming consoles are going to come out. They're going to be also more powerful, but the developers are going to target 60 frames, or at most a performance mode, or with 120 frames in mind. So 240 hertz, in my opinion, is at least 5-10 years from now, or maybe never. In my opinion, it will never happen. Never happen, because more computing power is going to be used for a higher fidelity, for more graphics. So the only way that screen becomes relevant is with variable refresh rate, and that's what we need. We need Motion Pro, black frame insertion, whatever you want to call that technique. We need that with G-Sync or with FreeSync, with VRR, basically. The day we get that, and the day we get that with a proper brightness level, with a proper brightness setting, well, I'm buying that TV. Where is it? That's my next TV. I'm telling you, I don't care. So I do care about HDR. HDR is awesome, it looks amazing. But HDR blurring, I don't care about that. I mean, in comparison with this, on every single game that I can get this level of performance to get the motion resolution for gaming, this is a lot more important than any HDR. A lot more important. So of course it would be ideal to get both. But I don't think we're gonna get that anytime soon, because they would need to develop a different technique, basically an impulse display. So yeah, that's my opinion. So people ask me, hey, why not G-Sync? Why you're gonna use Motion Pro if you can use G-Sync? And that's the answer. With black frame insertion and a game like this that allows you to set up basically a custom, I don't know why the frame rate is messed up now. It just happens when you start changing settings. Oh no, it's because I have ray tracing. So basically on a game like this that allows you to set up a dynamic resolution scaling and that you have enough power to lock that frame rate, basically the GPU is going to be utilized always on the 90%, 100%, and it's gonna give you the maximum amount of pixels possible, and it's going to retain that emotion, and that's what you need, that's what you want. So there's no, I mean, you can turn on G-Sync and use ray tracing, but here's what I would do. If I want to use ray tracing, here's what I do. I lock the game on 60, so I basically lock this refresh rate to 60, dynamic resolution scaling on 60. I turn on ray tracing, so all the graphics max out, and so I didn't change the resolution. So let me apply that. And I'm getting a lock 60 the entire game. I already tried that. So it's loading. I already tried that. It doesn't drop. It looks lock 60. And yes, there is some minor flickering at 60 frames, but it is worth it because you are getting the game max out and it looks amazing. And it looks better than 120. So can you get 120 frames, sample and hold with ray tracing? No, you cannot. So what about getting a visual experience that is like 120 frames, but then get ray tracing and get everything? And I don't have Motion Pro in high right now. It's just not looking. This is probably the auto. It's looking blurry, yeah. It's the auto detect. So at 60, high is the way to go, and to get the brightness, just use HLG tone mapping on, and it's gonna look fantastic. So you can get all the settings crank up if you have a high-end gaming PC. Use that auto dynamic resolution scaling in conjunction with DLSS. Crank up all the settings and get a lock 60, and that will be the way to go. So let me know if you have any questions. I think I covered everything, but if you have any questions, let me know.